emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus.
You have accessed entry 489.LV2523, certificate number 43273. The Forbidden Island. Island.
You like Hawaii?
Sure, what's not to like?
What, do you remember the first time you went?
I think it was for work. I think I had to speak at a thing in Kona or something.
Oh, it wasn't a thing you did as a family, as kids. You lived overseas. You never stopped.
Hawaii was on the way.
Yeah.
But you know what else is on the way? Alaska, a shorter Great Circle route.
Oh, interesting.
We never stopped in Alaska, but we would take the nonstop that would get you to Asia in 9 hours.
You know, Korean Airlines had a real Anchorage terminal. They were that was a big stopover, a refueling point, and also, you know, for espionage and
all the spying they were doing. Yeah. No, that plane that got shot down, I think, did take off from Anchorage.
It did.
Right? Yeah.
It did. That was a big moment for us.
But was not spying. Just was bad at geography.
Sure, whatever you want to tell yourselves.
You think the CIA is using Korean Air passenger jets?
Not anymore.
See what's going on, Stockholm? Yeah, the pilot failed. The pilot program, not the actual pilot.
Mm-hmm.
They tested it out once. No, so I never went to Hawaii until I was an adult. And then we started taking the kids who loved it.
And was it a yearly trip for you?
I feel like we've gone every year or two for the last little while. We were trying different islands.
Trying them out, see which one fit.
Yeah, it turns out we're Maui people.
Yeah.
You could probably just tell that. I mean,
could have told you that if I passed you in a supermarket.
We're
look at Mr. Maui over here.
Future Kama Aina. I'm going to be one of those guys that retires to Maui. A little sketchy. Lives in Paia. Never has shoes on.
I can picture it.
Don't stand too close at the juice bar. He probably smells like BO.
The thing is, you're going to have to get divorced, and I don't see that happening.
It's true.
Yeah.
Parallel. That's my plan B. 1 in 100. We get divorced. I become that sketchy guy on Maui.
What if Mindy's like, you know what, Ken? Why don't we take a gap year? Why don't I go do something and you go do something? Where do you think she would go?
Oh, she'd be doing pottery.
Oh, like here in the Northwest, or would she go to a pottery?
I mean, it is a boom town. It is a boom town for middle-aged women discovering pottery.
Right, Vashon.
So you don't have to eat, pray, love to Indonesia if you want to have a pottery midlife crisis. You're right here in the center of it.
As you're saying this, I know at least 3 millennial, older millennial women who are just like all in on pottery.
Yeah. Are they offended or are they delighted at the representation?
They are fully, this is my,
those are my people.
Consume my pottery is what they say. And I am an avid consumer of pottery.
I thought you were going to say consumer of older millennial women.
I mean,
and pottery.
The pottery is the gateway.
The Venn diagram of your interests.
Pots. Would you like to go get some coffee and talk about?
Well, you stay away from Mindy and her gradually improving ceramic skills.
I will. I've known Mindy long enough to know that she goes through various hobbies pretty quickly. She bounces from hobby to hobby, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. But she still keeps them up. You know, you'll still see her crocheting, and I'll be like, crocheting? It's 2016, baby. Like, it's back. But lately, it's been a lot of ceramics. So yeah, that's what she would do. She would head into the pottery studio and produce amazing vases.
And I would just be bumming around Paia.
Riding a bicycle with no shoes and a basket on the front that has like beach combing stuff in it.
I don't cut my hair anymore.
No.
Is there a world where I get a metal detector? I don't want to rule it out.
No, come on.
You don't think I'm that guy?
No, because I don't think there's any metal in the beaches in Hawaii.
It's true. You never see that there, just here.
Yeah, metal detectors would need there to be some kind of...
You don't think metal washes ashore in Hawaii?
I'm not sure metal washes ashore. I'm not sure that's how it gets on the beach. I think it more
Well, in Hawaii it
gets
would.
dropped on the beach somewhere.
Well, I could look for people's car keys too.
That's what it would end up
I'm
being.
bored.
Yeah.
In the scenario.
You know, I've tried to get people from other places besides the Northwest to take an interest in vacationing in Hawaii. People from the East Coast, people that I know kind of around the country and around the world. Hey, you know what? Why don't we all go to Hawaii and get a house? And
They have the Caribbean.
they do, and they have the additional complication of a 5-hour trip just to get to here.
Yeah.
To begin to stage our 5-hour trip to Hawaii.
We have Hawaii privilege.
We do.
And we are not blind to that.
If you were in New York,
To the degree, by the way, that you will wander around a random beach in Hawaii, and if it's a Seattle school holiday, your kids will see their friends.
yeah, it's like, hey, I mean, I'm running
Zach,
into people
what's
all the
up?
time.
Like, that's the number one thing I hear in Hawaii is, hey, Zach, what's
Hey,
up?
Zach, what's up?
Hey, kids, why are all your friends here? This is creepy.
I think if I lived in New York and I could go, I mean, if you drew a circle around New York, where can you get in 10 hours? It's most of the Western world,
Yeah.
right? In 10 hours.
Like,
you
they can go to Europe. They can,
they could be in Cairo.
like, honestly, Capri can be their Hawaii.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's not.
It's very frustrating.
They just go to Jamaica or whatever.
So as Northwesterners, right, we have, I mean, I've been going to Hawaii since I was a little kid. And,
Because you have, like, family connections. And,
well, we had my aunt and uncle had a house on Maui in the early 70s when it was still a very small island, it felt like.
sugar plantations still.
A lot of plantations.
And not a lot of Seattleites.
You could drive for hours and hours and see nothing but pineapples. There were already a lot of Seattleites there, interestingly.
We discovered Maui.
Yeah.
I mean, let's hear it for the Polynesians who did it, but also let's hear it for the Seattleites who took early Boeing planes.
You know what's really interesting about Captain Cook's Western sailing adventure,
Is he
which
did
is
not
what
come
we
back
call
from
it.
it.
He didn't come back from
That's
it.
my favorite ride. Like when I go to Universal, I'm like, is Captain Cook's Western Sailing Adventure open? Let's go on the CCWSA.
Well, you know, that was the 1700s, and you're right. He didn't survive his last trip to Hawaii.
I probably won't either, honestly.
That's right.
You and I might not survive our last
We'll
trip to
just ride
Hawaii.
our bicycles into the ocean.
Hopefully not for the same reason. I want fewer spears in me.
Do you think that's how I'll go? Spears?
Oh, not than you and then Captain Cook. But yeah, you will certainly be speared.
Oh, I
to
see.
death.
Right. I'll be speared because I'll be swimming too close to a monk seal, and the people on the beach will that's the end.
Come on.
You guy.
Some angry guy flying a Hawaiian flag upside down is going to be like, I've had it with this guy. Hawaii for the Hawaiians. Thunk.
What's funny is that the original Polynesians who settled Hawaii only really arrived in the 1300s.
Yeah.
So it's it's funny.
There goes the neighborhood.
It hasn't quite been as much time as elapsed between the Hawaiian discovery or Polynesian discovery of Hawaii and the arrival of Captain Cook. It hasn't been quite as much time from Captain Cook to today.
But that's kind of the midway point now, right?
We're getting into the midway point, yeah, of
of having gentrified Hawaii.
yeah, or just sort of like, well, there was the colonizing and then there was the real colonizing and now there's like the double, triple colonizing. But Hawaii has been pretty well colonized, I think you would agree.
In what sense? Like a lot of T-shirts for sale?
Well, it's actually a U.S. state.
Right. That's about as colonized.
So
Used to be like a monarchy and then suddenly a state.
well, yeah, I mean, it was like it was an overseas territory for a while, which is like colonized.
But not that long,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Like we very quickly were like, this this place is really good.
But strangely, when you think about, one of my favorite games, right, is people writing me and saying, it's not really a game. It feels like like violence when they say
A lot of good games feel like violence.
the distance between the time you were born and the end of World War II is the same as the distance between when you were in high school and now. And I'm like, go to hell.
I was watching Stand By Me last night, and we are literally a full decade longer from now to 1986 when Stand By Me was released than the nostalgia it is portraying.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, right. That happens all the time. When I was in high school, there were all these movies about I was transported back to the 50s and now I'm at my own mother's prom. And now it's like, well, that would be 2000.
9/11. Yeah. Oh no! I fell out of this tree peeping on my own mom, and then 9/11 happened. This day sucks.
God. Yeah, I was at a street fair the other day, and some teens, some 15-year-olds were playing Nirvana covers, and I realized that when I was that age, if I'd been playing covers at a street fair, it wouldn't even have been Buddy Holly.
Yeah, it would be more.
It would be
Bing
the
Crosby?
Andrews sisters.
Yeah, exactly.
It would just, dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. And
Every time you see a kid with one of those smiley faces, I'm like, I guess I could have had a Sinatra T-shirt when I was in high school, but I didn't.
Sort of. No, actually, no.
Yeah, there was no.
It would have just been like, I'm dressing like World War II today.
Yeah.
And then again tomorrow.
But nobody had that because teenagers had been invented in the interim, and so clothing rebooted.
When you think about like what I actually was wearing in
Are you
high
an
school,
Army Navy store?
Sort of Army Navy stuff, and a lot of it was World War II. God, I'm embarrassed now.
There you go. You're one of the Nirvana kids.
But that's right. And I was like, why are these grown-ups like copying our style? You've heard that, right? The anecdote recently went around that some kid looked at a grown-up in a Nirvana shirt and they were like, can't they get their own fashion?
You're too old for that.
Yeah. Why are you wearing like copying our Gen Z style?
It's kind of our thing.
It really was all along. But Hawaii has
It was nice of us to keep it warm for a while for them,
That's what Gen X has done. We just sit on the eggs.
We're going to invent the egg of grungeware
and then sit on it.
And put it in a lab somewhere in dry ice.
Sit on it with a look of frustration,
and then
mild frustration.
When we have kids or grandkids, they can have access to these fashions.
Although, I really thought that. Like, I have a bunch of my dad's old shirts that eventually I grew out of, but I couldn't get rid of because it was my dad's. This is my dad's shirt. And now I have a Gen Z daughter, and I'm like, I've been saving your grandfather's shirts for you. And she says...
Does it come back around? Like, what great shirts.
Yeah, I don't know that your dad's, like, Brooks Brothers button-down work shirt is really going to be part of my super cool, like, purple suede outfit.
It might depend on the kid. I mean, you're not wearing that to a Taylor Swift show.
Well, I would.
You would be asked to leave.
No
one would give you a friendship bracelet.
It would be like
people would be making enemy bracelets for you.
Putting a sign around my neck that said chaperone.
Like narc.
Narc. Hawaii has only been a U.S. state for 64 years.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
in living memory, it was discovered. People were like, honey, look, Hawaii. Let's eat some Dole pineapples.
Well, yeah, it was like, I was there in the war, and let me tell you.
It's great. Let's have bars themed like that when we come home. Like, that's all living memory.
It's pretty extraordinary. And what's also extraordinary is that Hawaii was not even a kingdom until the 19th century. Prior to that, it was, all the islands, and in many cases, the islands were subdivided among chiefs.
It was a perfect socialist collective. For centuries.
It was nice, except for all the war between the chiefs.
They did fight a lot because they had their little islands, and they were like, "What if we went over to that island and took their stuff?"
Yeah, there was a bunch of even on islands. It was sort of like, well, it's spring. Let's litter the beaches with bodies again as we try to push this volcanic rock wall that we built like 180 feet toward your volcanic atoll.
What do you think? Do you think it's all just psychology like that, or is there some socioeconomic? We're a little low on poi, and those guys look like they got so much poi.
I bet that's what it is. Low rock wall, you look over it, you see them eating poi. You look back in your community and you're like, not enough poi.
Let's hear it for the poi.
But I feel like mounting, to really, what Kamehameha did in unifying the islands as one kingdom, which he didn't do until 1810.
Well, don't put him down. Oh, it took him so long to unify the islands. I'm sure he did a great job.
Well, he was a young guy.
He was doing his best.
Yeah, he was. And I think the challenge is to put a navy together.
Right, because those islands are kind of far apart.
Yeah, they're far apart. And
Tricky tides and currents.
to get enough people across the
You've got
20
outriggers,
miles.
which is great for fishing and whatnot. But yeah, an invasion fleet?
Yeah,
You don't
right.
have PT boats.
So pretty tough to get. And, and the islands had their own dialects, right?
Is that true?
Yeah, they were separate enough cultures from one another that they...
So nobody was like, hey, let's go over to that part of Hawaii. They were like, look at that scary island.
Well,
That's where the others live.
I mean, I guess if you run over... I mean, if you think about Europe in not much earlier than 1810, if you went across the wrong fiefdom, the wrong
Suddenly
dukedom...
people are speaking Flemish and you're like, what the hell?
And then they're hitting you with spears over that little rock wall. Not volcanic rock, but it's the same. It's the same 5-foot rock
they're
wall.
They're still stacking rocks.
Yeah.
I mean, let's not say there's developed people here and not, because it's all the same rocks.
Yeah, until the steam engine, it's just rocks and spears.
Yeah.
But in those kind of early kingdom days, Hawaii's contact after Cook, most of the Western contact with Hawaiians was whalers.
Yeah.
Right? For then another 100 years, pretty much the only Westerners that came were there to replenish their water stocks and their coconut barrels.
Imagine what impression you would get of white people if all you were seeing were whalers.
Maybe
Maybe it would be accurate. I don't know.
Well, whalers, and then, Lahaina was a town where there were Western people there to service whalers.
Right.
Which is another
great.
nice.
Saloons and bordellos. What a lovely country you must have. Thanks for bringing it over here.
And so, Kamehameha, he did have a kingdom, and his descendants had a kingdom. But it was ungainly, and it was, and the islands were constantly kind of threatening to revolt and return to there would be
Whoever their local charismatic chief is.
Yeah, there'd be a guy who was like, "Come on, why are we paying taxes in poi to Honolulu?"
It's the great state of Jefferson, but it's just some guy on Maui or something.
That's right. And then the Western, the real Western invasion kind of happened in the mid-19th century. Invasion. The Westerners started to come for reasons other than whaling, and those reasons were primarily ranching. Hawaii was seen as a fantastic place to raise sheep and cows, and I think
in practice, did that not turn out to be the case?
No, it really was. I mean,
okay.
There's even today, a real cowboy culture that survives in Hawaii, and you see it on the Big Island a lot.
I was about to say, not so much on Maui, but yes.
Yeah, right. In Maui, not so
water,
many.
Not enough water on most of it.
Yeah. What's interesting, you mentioned water. A lot of Hawaiian islands, the impediment to settlement, and this was always true, was just that they didn't have fresh water.
Yeah.
Which seems crazy given the number of storms, and just seems like there would be abundant water.
The idea that you're in the lush tropics.
Right.
But I guess volcanic rock doesn't.
Well, yeah, there aren't as many streams, but the reason is that the moisture is traveling pretty fast in big fat clouds that are just too high to interact with most of the islands.
So there's no rain shadow of.
Right. So the Big Island and Maui and Oahu, they have peaks on them that collect the water.
So there's a wet side and a dry side.
But there are a lot of those low atolls and even Molokai, right, doesn't have any big peak.
I mean, if you stay on the west coast of Maui, you're always looking out at, what is it, Kaho'olawe or whatever that island is?
It's just got Navy bombs on it.
Yeah, I mean, but even before Navy bombs, every attempt to plant stuff there kind of failed. I mean, look, the Navy didn't help. All the unexploded ordnance there doesn't help.
Look, the Navy almost never helps, but in this story, we'll have to reevaluate that.
But I'm just saying, like, for centuries before that, many native attempts to grow whatever kind of failed because, as you're saying, They're all just low, flat lumps that would just be reddish soil if left to their own devices.
And that's what's, what interesting about the main Hawaiian Islands. And the Hawaiian archipelago it extends all the way to Midway Island.
Yeah, further than you would think the state of Hawaii should stretch.
Yeah, it
wouldn't fit in that little inset box with Alaska.
It would not. It would not. And I think there's all of Hawaii. If you count all of the land, it's only 6,400 square miles, which still makes it bigger than Delaware and Rhode Island.
Yay!
But
like smaller than a lot of U.S. counties, for example.
And, that's right.
Or smaller than a lot of not national parks, but it's a small place, and a lot because most of the islands there's only 7 to speak of, right?
There are 7 big ones, but there are 137 other 137 islands total.
But here's what I'm saying: the 130 ones are just terrible.
Yeah, some of them are lumps, some of them are bumps. Some of them are
humps.
Humps. I think I might have said humps.
No, you said lumps and bumps.
Oh, I said lumps and bumps.
Let's have the stenographer read that back.
So of the 137 islands, only 7 are even inhabited. So it's not like the Caribbean where some billionaire goes and buys some Bahama and puts a house on it and says, let's throw a music festival. It's not even that good. It's not even that good.
Because they're just desolate. Nobody would.
Yeah, they're just like you say. There's no fresh water and there's no vegetation, or what little vegetation there is isn't enough, and they're really far apart.
Yeah,
and in the middle of the Pacific. So in the Caribbean, you can have you can own your own island if you're a billionaire
and go for the day.
Yeah, and just putt around or go to the supermarket over on not on Curacao. That's the wrong direction, but yeah, somewhere in the Midi.
But Larry Ellison bought Lanai, and that was it. That was the low-hanging fruit, as it were. You can't really buy your own good Hawaiian island anymore.
Yeah, he bought part of Lanai, right? He doesn't get to say he bought it all. And Zuckerberg's got some big thing that he's pissing people off all the time, right?
Is that true?
Yeah, I think he bought some big part of an island and then immediately started saying no trespassing or something like that. You can no longer fly your kites over my beach.
Well, you don't have to stay on Maui long to realize how convenient things would be if Oprah would let people use her road.
Is that right? She's got a road and she doesn't let people use it?
Did you not know this?
Oh, well, it's up on that side.
Yeah.
Oh, so you can't go around the island.
Like from Wailea, it'd be much quicker to go almost anywhere if Oprah would let her use your road.
Wait, that can't be Oprah.
It is.
You're kidding.
No, and she has a road that she will let guests use. Not guests on her show, that would be weird, but guests of her ranch. And yeah, so to go almost anywhere in Maui, you have to go all the way up to Kahului and then back down to upcountry or to Hana.
That space where the road doesn't go through is right up above Kihei. We look at it all the time and why isn't there a road through there?
Yeah, tens of thousands of people in Kihei are like, this would be much easier.
We could just go straight up there and then we'd be over on the other side.
And your annoyance has a name, and that name is Oprah.
Oprah. Yeah. What is she doing that's so not Oprah? Isn't Oprah like... And the other thing is, why is she up there? Why wouldn't she have some beach house? She's all the way up in
I'm sure she does.
Cattletown.
She owns property over on the other side of the island too. So I don't know where.
Maui. How did I not know this?
I don't know where she spends her nights, but she has a road, and you don't get to go on it.
Well, now I want to know how she spends her nights. I never see her in the bars.
We can ask Stedman, but he might not know either.
Right, where's Stedman in all this?
He has no. He's like, Oprah, where you been spending your nights?
Well, you still can and I think I would have said you have to live in San Francisco to be lumped into this Hawaii culture of Western American vacationers.
Do LA people go too, or is it just too nice in LA?
I think they all go to Mexico.
Yeah.
I mean, the problem is
like Cabo's like less than 2 hours or something like that. So it's.
This is the problem, right? And Alaska Airlines went all in on trying to get us all to go to Mexico because I don't know what. They were controlling the government or something. And it used to be Alaska was...
It's narco-terrorism. They run Alaska Airlines.
There it is.
The drug lords now own Alaska Airlines.
So more and more people from here, I think you reach a certain age. You know how they say if you live in Seattle, then you retire to West Seattle? I think if you have money in the Northwest, you you now head down to Mexico or Palm Springs. It's just crazy going to Palm Springs. I don't understand it at all.
Not if you're gay. If you're straight, go to Mexico.
I'm half gay.
So you can go, you're on a place in each.
Yeah, there you go. But I don't like Mexico. I mean, no. That's not what I said.
Wow.
I don't mean to say that. I don't prefer to vacation in Mexico.
Because of your deep respect for their culture and heritage.
That's exactly right.
Palm Springs, you're like, who gives a crap?
I'm not a colonizer. I don't want to go down there. And whatever damage I've done in Hawaii,
it's already done.
It's a sunk cost.
It's already done. Those monk seals are already traumatized.
But in the mid-19th century, it was still Hawaii from the standpoint of a Western immigrant, let's say. Hawaii was still pretty undeveloped in those terms. It was still a subsistence lifestyle for the most part. If you weren't accommodating whalers by, I don't know what, filling their buckets.
So colonization, which we deplore, was already ruining it, but only at the edges of it.
Yeah, and then more and more ranchers came, more and more people. It was, vacationing wasn't yet a thing. Right. So the beaches were not.
Well, imagine a vacation back then where it takes you a week to get there. What kind of vacation is that?
Well, yeah, or longer, or more, right? Depending on where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But our story now pivots to some Scots.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's what we call people from Scotland.
It's also what we call a plot twist.
Yeah.
Scott twist. Suddenly.
A Scot twist.
Suddenly Scotland appears.
A wild Scotland appears.
A wild Scot appears and lifts up his kilt.
And the thing is, that isn't even its final form.
I'm going to Hawaii.
A Scottish family, one of whom is a sea captain, a whaling captain, is sailing around looking for a place to be, and they go to New Zealand, which is a long way from Scotland, more than a week. And
it's basically antipodal on the earth to Scotland.
Yeah, that's right.
Very close.
It's right on the other side.
I think Spain and New Zealand are directly antipodal. So that's as far as you can get from Scotland, which is where I've always wanted to live. As far as I could get from Scotland.
And in that you have a lot in common with a lot of other people from Scotland. How can we get as far away from here as we want?
That's why they all go to space and become engineers in Starfleet.
Oi, as they say.
Captain, I don't want to go back to Scotland.
I can't get enough power.
Let me look at the lithium crystals.
Scotland. So this family went to New Zealand and ranched for a while, and then the patriarch of the family died. His wife, dissatisfied with New Zealand for various reasons that I think New Zealanders can confirm.
No. If you're tired of New Zealand, you're tired of life.
She relocated her family to Vancouver Island in British Columbia and found herself even more dissatisfied.
Well, she's gone from one kind of rainy place to another barely temperate rainy place.
That's exactly right.
Vancouver Island is the New Zealand of the Northern Hemisphere.
It really is, except without any beautiful sunny part.
Right.
So there is a beautiful sunny part. Northern New Zealand has at least some sunny, right?
I don't know.
Mostly sunny? With a chance of rain?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what they say there.
And in Vancouver Island, it's 100% chance of rain.
There's a reason they're not shooting Lord of the Rings movies in Vancouver.
Yeah, right. Well, why? It would be a perfect place for it.
No, it's not as nice.
What, you're saying Vancouver Island is not as nice as New Zealand?
Sure.
Boy, that's tough talk.
Well, it's got the Southern Alps down there.
I see.
We have the Cascades, I guess, but
yeah, and proximity to beautiful Vancouver and Seattle. I mean, it's a nice region here.
Okay, I changed my mind.
Thank you.
Lord of the Rings movies should only be made in Vancouver.
Yeah, okay, good. The future.
Take that, New Zealand.
In this instance, Elizabeth McHutchinson Sinclair decided to take her family on another great adventure to the archipelago of Hawaii, the Kingdom of Hawaii, looking for a place for them to finally settle and ranch sheep and cows as they'd been doing in New Zealand, as they found very difficult to do on Vancouver Island. Lots less ranching possibilities.
Did you say McHutchinson?
McHutchinson Sinclair.
That's kind of a lot.
It's a lot.
Hutchinson, okay, but McHutchinson?
Yeah, Hutch is fine. Hutchinson, because you had a Hutchins, and then Hutchinson's son.
Normally, the thing you put after the Mac can be a name, MacDonald, MacGregor, but Mac Hutchinson implies the existence of some dude named Hutchinson.
Well, and he must have, and they must have been Danes, right? Because in English, we don't put son at the end of our...
You shouldn't have a Mac and a son.
Yeah, that's the thing. And that wasn't even her last name. Her last name was Sinclair.
It's not even her final form.
Because her husband was, her husband was a Sinclair.
Okay.
Anyway, she and 13 members of her extended family, children and grandchildren, and various cousins and servants apparently, arrive on the islands looking for a place to ranch. And she considers, and she's a proper Victorian, she arrives in a wool floor-length gown, dress with a ruffled collar, like right up under her chin. I mean, she's the proper matriarch here. And she goes to King Kamehameha, and this is now Kamehameha IV.
Ooh.
So
the voyage home?
Yeah, this is the younger, again, a young king. And she says, "Hey, I want to bring this party to Hawaii, and I'm looking for she goes to Honolulu. She goes to Waikiki, and is like, yeah, I see it, but there's not cows and sheep like some highland, not too high, but."
What do you think the attitude of the royal family is at this point to more and more Victorians coming in their holly hunter dresses?
Well, there's a sense, I think, in the Hawaiian royal culture, which had adopted a lot of the mannerisms or was increasingly becoming more and more westernized, that there wasn't much of an economy in Hawaii. And, it's very hard to look back, particularly now when we look back at some of these events in this era, the 18th, 19th century, where Europeans are venturing around the world and trying to put ourselves in the mindset of the local inhabitants and their interactions with those Western sailors and ranchers and industrialists. And a lot of the time, I think now our conventional view is that the Westerners arrived with rapacious intent, and the local residents were dupes.
Hey, no.
And just like, oh, stop. But in fact, Westerners arrived in very small numbers, and local kings and so forth often welcomed them and often said, oh, let's trade or let's deal. And it was only most successful invasions do not happen in a wave of outrigger canoes. They happen in a very gradual and slow bringing of cousins.
In aggregate.
Yeah, and it's
very different than it seemed when it was just...
Yeah, where are all these cousins coming from? And, and it's just, and little by little, and I think those relationships for many years, sometimes for hundreds of years, are symbiotic, but very different cultures encountering one another. And primarily, if your culture has a sense of land ownership versus a sense of shared stewardship.
The culture that doesn't have land ownership often gets the shaft.
That's right, because land ownership gets, gradually really establishes some fences beyond a 5-foot defensive wall of pumice. Then you've got smaller fences where people are like, whoa, you said...
Why are you coming over here?
This belongs to me. Remember this piece of paper? So Kamehameha, I think, was excited to deal with Mrs. Sinclair and really tried to accommodate her desire to find a home for her family and her cows and her sheep, because it seemed like it was going to bump up the overall gross national product of the Kingdom of Hawaii. Mm-hmm. And they settled on the westernmost of the main 7 islands of Hawaii, which even at the time, because of lack of water and sort of lack of real nice agricultural land, it was the least populated of the 7 islands.
It's also the furthest away.
Furthest away. It's way out to the west. It's westernmost of the big main islands.
There's kind of that big gap before you get to Kauai, and then it's further still.
Yeah, and Kauai and the island in question, which we are now finally arriving at, the Forbidden Island, the westernmost island, Niihau, is not that far from Kauai. In fact, you claim to have seen it.
I have seen it. Like, yeah, if you do that hike, have you been to Kauai?
I've never been to Kauai.
It's nice.
It's nice. I've been to 4 Hawaiian islands, not Kauai.
We did a hike kind of up western Kauai. You know, you get to this, I can't remember what it's called. What's the park there? It's called the Grand Canyon of Hawaii, which is, you know, Hawaii doesn't need a Grand Canyon. Hawaii's Hawaii.
Yeah.
But
it's got a lot of canyons.
Waimea Canyon, that's what it is. And as you go up there, you can see this big island off to your west where you're like, wait, there's another Hawaiian island here, which you didn't think there was. You're way over in Kauai.
That's right.
But there is, and it's forbidden. That's why I didn't know.
It's forbidden.
It made me Google it on my phone, which is kind of...
At the time?
Yeah, as I was hiking.
What is this thing?
Which is why I'm going to have a little sneak preview of the stuff you're about to say.
Well, so it's only 17 miles over, and although it looks big, I think from Kauai, and I mean it is big.
Well,
but it's less than 70 square miles.
By the standards of the 130 tiny islands, it's big.
Yeah, right. The last big one, and it has now almost no one on it. In 2010, the census said that there were fewer than 200 people.
Oh, wow.
But a lot of, I think, firsthand reports now say there's like 70 people, and maybe not even that. Maybe 50 people.
People bailed, or are they getting murdered?
They're little by little being consumed by a sea monster.
Wow.
But when the island was in the mid-1800s, the island had 1,000 people living on it. And it had, prior to Kamehameha's unification of the islands, even that had two separate chiefs who were always at war with each other, and they were then also kind of very much connected to Kauai before Kamehameha. The final chief had conquered or had combined Kauai and Niihau into one little fiefdom, and then that was its last iteration before being part of the Kingdom of Hawaii.
So there were people there when...
There were 1,000 people that were...
McHutchinson, arrived.
Sinclair. Doctor. 1,000 people living a subsistence lifestyle. And this was during the era when the missionaries were really also coming into Hawaii and trying to... and began that process of Christianization that then leads to... women in black hoods spanking children for using their native language, spanking them with reeds.
Does that stuff happen? Are there residential schools and stuff?
There absolutely were. I mean, as Hawaii became more and more an American protectorate, or within the American sphere, but even before, I mean, when it was there were a lot of Scots there.
Yeah.
But as it was being integrated into Western, as it was increasingly dominated by Western settlers, part of that was, as is often the case with Western encounter with indigenous cultures, a pretty systemic attempt to eradicate Hawaiian language because they were trying to eradicate Hawaiian religion, and replace it with Christianity. And how do you do that? Well, you take away what to the nuns were probably the secret codes of a language that has only 7 consonants.
A lot of it must just be like laziness. Like, I don't want to learn this language. What if we just extirpate it and make them talk in my language?
And that's what they did here in the Northwest. That is the story, and I think that's the part of colonialism that doesn't necessarily follow private ownership of land. That's much more about Christianization, I think. So Kamehameha says to Elizabeth McHutchinson Sinclair, "I'll sell you the island of Niihau for $10,000 in gold."
Did he say it the Dr. Evil way?
He did. He put a pinky to his, and he said $10,000 in gold and to sweeten the pot, 1 grand piano.
$1 grand piano.
1 grand piano. 10,000 in gold and 1 grand piano.
That's a lot of money. It's not a huge amount of pianos, but it is a lot of money in the 19th century.
Yeah, this would be during the American Civil War, 1863-64. And actually the negotiations started with Kamehameha IV and then continued with his successor Kamehameha V, who was the one that eventually signed the deal. And so the Sinclairs moved to Niihau, and it became their private community.
They bought it. They had the money. She had $10,000 in a piano stashed someplace.
She had it, and the king sold it to her. So it was not a thing where they arrived and
took over.
It was a deal. I'm sure in the.
I mean, they kind of did. When you arrive like that and you're dealing with the rich upper classes, like. There's still lots of things that can be done to screw over the average Niihauite.
Yeah, that's right.
When the two rich people from different cultures,
anytime you're dealing with a king, the chances are that the subsistence fishermen are not going to.
They didn't get consulted probably.
But Kamehameha said in that original exchange, he said, "Niihau is yours," and this is reported. This conversation is held today, because that family continues to control this island. That's why it's the Forbidden Island. It has remained in this family
almost 200 years later,
since
1864.
Years later? Yeah.
Wow.
And the family now is known as the Robinson family.
What happened to the McCutcheons?
Sinclairs? Well, the
intermarriage.
The daughter of the Sinclair clan, the main surviving daughter married a Robinson, and then the Robinson family ended up the Stewards.
It is a good name for like Pacific Island colonization.
Yeah,
like if you're going to be named anything, be named Robinson.
Well, that's the thing. Robinson Crusoe was the original.
You're saying it the Gilligan's Island way. Robinson Crusoe, 3 syllables.
Robinson Crusoe. That's how we said it in my colonial schools.
Because you had Gilligan's Island.
That was the original Castaway novel.
And that's why the Swiss Family Robinson are called that. Like, their name is not actually Robinson in the book.
No.
I believe they're never named.
But in the French translation...
But if you're Swiss, you can't be named Robinson. But the idea is, this is a Robinsoniad.
That's right.
Like, that's the name of the genre.
That's right. The Swiss Family Robinson was in the original French, or the Swiss French, was like, this Robinson-like family.
Right.
Robinsonian family, yeah. So Robinson, is now it rings out in all the halls of all the islands in the
So
in the
of all the
Pacific.
surnames to somehow have lucked into a Pacific island, good job.
Right. That's right. And so according to their oral tradition, Kamehameha said, and this is kind of a puzzle, but it gives you some insight into the moment.
Okay.
Said, Niihau is yours, but the day may come when Hawaiians are not as strong in Hawaii as they are now. 1864.
The implication is we might need it back if we get...
No, he said, do what you can to help the Hawaiians.
Oh, I see. So it might be needed to be some kind of a haven.
And that's how the Sinclairs and the Robinsons took the edict.
Like
right?
they have a stewardship.
We have an obligation. And so from that time, they did not allow a ban on the Hawaiian language. And they allowed, and this is the problem with these terms, right? Like, because there's a very...
They don't have any political power, really.
Yeah, there's a very paternalistic element, aspect to using the term allowed, but this is their private island.
They're landowners.
And they said the Hawaiians who live here can continue to live here and continue to maintain their culture. As it is, not only will we not intervene, but the family all learned Hawaiian.
Oh.
And so Hawaiian became the language of the island for both the white landowners and the remaining Hawaiians. And they said, we'll charge no rent. We will provide full employment on the ranch. And in the case, because we're ranching sheep and cows, meat will be free to any resident of the island. And everything else you collect from the ocean and the beaches and what you grow, belongs to you.
All these islands are yours.
Yeah.
Except Niihau. Attempt no landings there. So and this is like a mid 19th century edict, but the crazy thing is that it kind of survives.
Well, so then the rest of the Hawaiian Islands undergo successive waves of development and all these church schools, and then ranchers come from all over and develop this. Oprah comes and closes the road, and then there's sugar, and then there's pineapple, and the languages are gradually eradicated until the only Hawaiian island that still has Hawaiian as its native tongue is Niihau.
And is Niihau like, is there like trade between Niihau and Kauai or the other islands? I mean,
so they're ranching. So
do people come there to join this native paradise, or?
So for a while, for the second half of the 19th century, yes. And there were, people would come to work the ranch. There were, obviously the Robinsons got there somehow. They didn't start there.
They didn't shipwreck. They decided to go there.
But there were other workers. There were, by the mid 20th century, fully a third of the inhabitants of Hawaii, the territory of Hawaii, were of Japanese descent in some way.
And did that happen on Niihau or not?
There were not. It wasn't a third, but there were a few Japanese.
So immigration to this island wasn't restricted. Then it's not a forbidden island.
Then it wasn't. Well, up until the end of the 19th century, it wasn't. In the early teens, the steward of the island at the time recognized that this was, because there still was no such thing as tourism, but recognized that if there was continued, technology had arrived in the form of all kinds of...
there were steam vessels
vessels. It was much easier to get there from Kauai. And Kauai had traditionally been Niihau's sister economy and a lot of interdependence. But the Robinson at the time said, wait a minute, we're going to close the island because this influence is starting to corrupt the sort of subsistence-based and native Hawaiian culture and religion. And we have this program that dates to Kamehameha, and we have made this pact.
It's so interesting that these are the white interlopers, but they're like, hey, like we've got to hold back the change because now we represent the interests of the indigenous people.
Right. And they closed it and said no, and big fines if you make that crossing without authorization. There was a small, only 3 Japanese residents of the island who remained through that period. But for the most part, they, and at a certain point, the Robinsons were marrying local residents. And of course they all grow up speaking the dialect of Niihau, which is a specific dialect. And because of its isolation, linguists now recognize that it is closer to original Hawaiian than any of the other Hawaiian languages that are being preserved and spoken and taught in the rest of the archipelago.
Even though it might not have been Kamehameha V's language, the others have drifted so far away.
That and in a lot of cases, one of the distinctions is that the letter K, which is, as you know, like a major part of the language.
They don't have that many letters. They really lean on K.
Is actually pronounced as a T.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, because in Hawaiian, I've always observed, like, in places where other Pacific islands would say taboo, they say kapu. Like the T of other Polynesian cultures became a K in Hawaii, but maybe that happened over time. If it was still kind of T sounding,
Yeah, it might have been
in the 19th century.
King Tameatea. Might have been Ting Tameatea.
That'd be crazy. They were going to Tawai instead of Kauai.
Yeah. So
wow.
So it's interesting, and as a result, it's truly the last enclave. It's the only place where the population has English as a second language. It's the primary language, and was until recently. Now, when they first took over the island, that 1,000 residents, some large portion of them said, we're not into ranching. We're not, we're not going to hang here. We're going to go to Kauai. And so the population was always sort of 500 people, more or less. And so the Robinsons have no plumbing
to this day.
Huh. No running water.
Is this by necessity or by choice?
By choice.
Huh.
No, until very recently, no electricity.
Wow.
No phone or internet. No tobacco or alcohol, and no guns.
That's just got to be their edict, right? Like, this will be more stable
from the time
they introduce these social ills.
Yeah, from the time they shut it down and made it the Forbidden Island in 1918, these things were just. I mean, travel between the islands was so restricted that they just wouldn't. They'd stop any of this from coming, and so subsistence really is maintained in the sense that there's certainly no television, but there's also not, you're living as you would have.
It's borderline Sentinelese, they're not uncontacted. They were like employed by a big white landowner, but they kind of are. You know?
And what's interesting is the residents were not restricted to travel. They could easily go to Kauai.
They can come and go.
They know the world.
And does trade still happen?
But nobody can come back with them, and trade is restricted, right? The Robinsons don't allow. They're selling sheep and cows, and
so it's still a working ranch.
It's a working ranch.
So most of the residents of Niihau are still working the Robinson ranch.
Most of the young men were cowboys, and yeah, and a lot of like I say, there's no rent, and meat is free. So it's
really the American dream.
It's
no rent and meat is free.
Yeah, strangely, it's this borderland between. If you,
I'm just trying to imagine
if you're working the ranch. There's no real call for money.
Yeah.
So working the ranch is like, what do we do? What is the work?
Just maintain your meat privileges, I guess.
It's kind of what we're. Yeah, it's kind of sort of.
And they can grow their own veggies and stuff, so they don't actually. It's not like, boy,
harvest whatever.
I hope we have enough meat this year that we can afford the actual stuff we need, because they're not actually worried about. I don't know. They don't need a ton of heating oil, for example. They don't need a ton of produce.
The problem with there being no running water is that it still is a feast or famine situation in terms of water.
Right.
And so during the rainy season, it's. It's easy, but there's always a dark time when the water dries up. And in that period, many residents would always traditionally and still go over to Kauai.
To lush Kauai.
To kind of, survive the drought.
Do you think, I'm just trying to imagine, so electricity is recent, media is recent, but maybe still not?
Not real. There's no internet. They did.
No internet. So if they, who on that island has had a box of Lucky Charms, for example?
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Who knows who Taylor Swift is?
Well, the thing about it is that with that access to Kauai, I'm sure that their relatives that live on Kauai all have television and every other mod con.
You go over there and people are still going to be wearing San Francisco 49ers t-shirts or whatever?
Yeah, probably. And that's another thing that's so interesting about it. It's not a cult.
Yeah.
Right? The Robinsons aren't like, don't go. They're just like,
Kauai is evil. They're just like, no, nobody can come.
Go as much as you want.
Are there accounts of people getting rare permission to go there, and you get journalists or?
So that happens. So the there are some outsiders allowed, and one of them, and this is we foreshadowed it a little while ago, the U.S. Navy early on said, look, yes, sure, you guys own the island, but we're the United States Navy, and we're a big deal.
We go where we want.
I'm not sure if you know that we're kind of a big deal. And so they built an installation there to monitor the enemy, whoever the enemy is today. Right now, I'm sure they're worried about Kim Jong-il, or maybe, I don't know, they might still be worried about Osama bin Laden. I can't get inside their heads. But they don't staff, it's not permanently staffed. They built the installation.
Do you think that's out of deference to the Robinson rules?
Hard to know, but the facility is maintained by native residents of the island.
Oh, interesting.
And so in paying the lease on the facility and in paying the residents to maintain it, the Navy comprises 80% of the income of the island. And they don't live there. There's no Navy guy sitting in a tower. But they do come, and it's always cryptically referenced that they use the island sometimes for special operations, which means I'm sure that Navy SEALs land on the island.
Yeah.
And at one article I read said that the local residents are paid to dress like
like
bad guys,
like North Koreans or like Taliban or something.
Or something, like and then track the SEALs using their special ways and knowledge of the island.
This is basically the most dangerous game.
Yeah, they war game it. Now, this island is also the setting of a dark World War II moment.
Oh.
During the bombing of Pearl Harbor, a Japanese Zero pilot by the name of Shigenori Nishikayachi his plane was damaged.
That's a lot of name also, by the way.
It is also.
That is the Mac Hutchinson of Japan.
It's a lot. And the Japanese invasion force, the admirals had identified Niihau as an uninhabited island that would be the kind of rendezvous point for soldiers and pilots who had been shot down or crashed. They would all try and convene on this island, and then be rescued by submarine. And so Shigenori crash landed his Zero on the island, and because of the media embargo, no radios, no electronics there, they were on the island, had no awareness of what had happened at Pearl Harbor. And the 3 Japanese residents of the island who were, Americans, they were descendants of sharecroppers or of, earlier residents that were working the ranch, gave shelter to this Japanese pilot. And
there's not keeping up on current events. And gave him what later was described as aid and comfort. And there's this moment when news of the bombing of Pearl Harbor reached the island, and the native residents said, wait a minute, this is not, because they welcomed him at first in a sort of with some hospitality. Oh,
like,
look, it's a fellow Japanese guy.
Yeah. And all the residents of the island were oh, hello. This is terrible that you crashed your airplane. Like, let's
help?
Sit with us. But then the realization that what had happened, they went to capture him and he escaped. Eventually he was killed. The person who killed him actually was a woman, but she received no acknowledgement. But there was a man who participated in the pursuit who was shot and I think was awarded if not a Medal of Honor, then a Silver Star.
But some kind of military distinction.
He was given, he was feted as someone who had fought this Japanese pilot. But the incident of these Japanese Americans who, with no prior exhibition of loyalty to Japan, that they sheltered and aided this pilot kind of past the point that it was obvious that he was an enemy combatant, was then increasingly used in the early days of the war as anecdotal evidence that the Japanese on the West Coast could not be trusted to not side with Japanese.
This is like a Twilight Zone episode, kind of a microcosm. The war arrives here and causes community strife.
Right. And so as the movement on the West Coast of the United States to consider interring the Japanese, there really wasn't any evidence that, for instance, the large Japanese population in Seattle and Portland and San Francisco were any threat to the United States.
They were all happily running their flower shops.
This was the anecdote. Ni hao was the...
There were only 3 Japanese people here, and they totally sold out and helped the pilot.
And so it became although, there's the reasons for Japanese internment are legion. There was a lot of racism pre-existing.
Yeah, so it might have happened anyway.
But this was when anybody said, wait a minute, my family's been living in America for 3 generations.
These are all American citizens. They're
great.
What
are you talking about? They could always point to this, right? The xenophobes could always say, well, we've got firsthand evidence. Now, what's interesting is there were no Japanese internments in Hawaii because Hawaii had
too many.
1/3 of the population was Japanese, including 90% of the carpenters.
So who's going to build the camp?
Yeah, so they didn't. They were like,
I never thought about that.
We can't really put everybody in camps here, so we're just going to let it ride. There was certainly some suspicion and racism, but it was like, well, that would be tricky. But we're definitely going to do it in
the places where we can get away with it. We're totally going to imprison citizens.
Yeah, and I guess neither of us do know how, but panic, racist panic is definitely a thing. And the more, and I think in Hawaii, the Japanese population was much more integrated because Hawaii remains the most diverse of the United States. It's the only one that has a white minority.
There's a point where you just can't bamboozle people because everybody knows.
But in Seattle, there was still a Japan town. You could kind of, you could say well, everybody in this neighborhood is
that's them. There's a movement to not say internment camp anymore. Are you aware of this?
Oh, no, I wasn't.
Maybe it's a little bit it's too much like the government euphemisms. Oh, we're not actually.
Are we saying concentration
We're just interning
camp?
them. I think you might say concentration camp. Yeah, I don't know.
It's one of these.
You are concentrating them.
It's one of those.
Incarceration camp, maybe?
Which euphemism do you prefer? Concentration, internment, or, prison?
I guess we don't say relocation centers anymore. That was the real newspeak.
Relocation
That was like the government.
But that's the thing. Are we replacing newspeak with newspeak? It's it's double plus ungood. We know that for sure. Anyway, recently things have changed because in 1999, the Robinsons realized that the ranching was no longer a viable business. And so they shut down the ranch.
Oh, the ranch is gone.
Now, in the 80s, they bought a helicopter. And they bought a helicopter primarily because
of Magnum PI.
Because of Magnum PI. They were like,
Magnum.
This is cool. No, they said, we don't have any way if somebody needs to go to the hospital. We don't have any emergency services. And so they bought a helicopter. Then they realized, this is before the ranch closed, but they realized a helicopter is expensive. And so they started offering very expensive helicopter tours around the outside of the island.
They're very limited amount of tourism.
We're not going to fly over the village. We're just going to take you over. And then gradually, I think they landed on an uninhabited place sort of to the south and let tourists out to snorkel and spend a couple hours on the beach and then back in the helicopter.
And a lot of the appeal is just going to be, this is the only way to come here. Because there are people who are just like, nobody can get to that place. How do I get to that place?
Yeah, it's a kind of adventure tourism to say, I've been to all 7 Hawaiian islands, including the Forbidden Island. And really, they continued to do those tours primarily to pay for the helicopter. It's a little bit of a circular, like we have a helicopter, and in order to pay for the helicopter, we have to have a helicopter. And then after the ranch closed, there suddenly was kind of an explosion of sheep and wild boar because there weren't people controlling those populations. And so then they started, again, very expensively, flying hunters in on safari to try and control the population of boar and the wild sheep.
But what happens to the free meat deal when there's no more ranch?
So this is the thing. The Robinsons continued to...
Airdrop in Burger King?
Well, no. They continued to provide no rent, free meat, all the former largesse, I guess, or support.
Yeah.
But they weren't earning any money. And so
now the Robinsons are in.
The Robinsons are spending their own.
And they were never living high on the hog,
No.
you know?
And according to the indigenous Hawaiians living there, the Robinsons were always digging the ditches with them, lived among them, that never kept themselves in the big house, always were trying to be part of the native culture. And again, spoke the native language. And so the island now is in the control of two brothers, Bruce and Keith Robinson. And Bruce Robinson is kind of internationally famous as a conservationist ecologist, and
he went away and got a degree.
Yeah, he's got a botanical garden there where there are like numerous species of vegetation that are extinct everywhere else in Hawaii, and some of the only of those trees and bushes and plants that exist in the world. The island is a haven for monk seals, and monk seals are critically endangered. There's only 1,500 in the world, and like some large proportion of them actually sort of reside there.
They need Nihao.
And so in the, as you were saying, upside down Hawaiian flag, like independence movement that's there, or anti-colonialist sentiment around the world.
Yeah.
There's like strangely a pass given to
the one island that's actually owned by a white family.
Yeah. Because it's so hard to know what to say about it.
Yeah.
Because it's really like an incubator of the last vestiges of like not untouched, but the last vestiges of a lot of aspects of Hawaiian culture that couldn't have survived, wouldn't have survived, but probably wouldn't have survived without the Robinsons.
I mean, you can see a world where it becomes like a colonial Williamsburg, where you can see the ancestral ways. But
Except they won't let anybody on.
Yeah, but that would clearly ruin it. You know, it's the Heisenberg thing of all those people showing up to gawk at the native culture will just change and Disneyfy the native culture.
And both of the brothers are now in their 80s.
Oh, is that right?
And
is there a new generation?
So Bruce's wife, Liana Robinson, is Native Hawaiian, and she has kind of taken over the stewardship of the place. And they actually, the two of them, gave the keynote speech at the World Indigenous Peoples Conference on Education about 10 years ago. And so she gave the speech, and they had many sort of residents of the island saying, like, without the Robinsons, we wouldn't be able to do this, and we wouldn't have retained our culture. But the future of the island, I mean, they've obviously been offered billions for the island by various Ellisons.
It's worth a little more than whatever 10,000 in gold in 1860 now is.
Yeah, that's right. And at one point, actually, this is a funny story. At the end of World War II, when they were talking about the United Nations and where to headquarter it, I didn't realize this, but it was a global competition. People
really?
all around the world were like, you should put the United Nations in Switzerland. No, you should put it over here. And Roosevelt really believed that the best idea was to put it on an atoll somewhere.
So it was part of no nation.
Yeah, as far away from other civilizations as it could be to have this sort of independence.
Yeah.
And he considered...
The Bond villain view of the United Nations.
And the governor of Hawaii at the time was like all in on this and put together a huge presentation saying you need to build the United Nations in Honolulu. Roosevelt said, what about Niihau? We'll build the United Nations there.
Wow.
Completely apart from any other place.
Very hard to get catering.
Yeah. And then New York was like, how about New York? And Rockefeller actually was like, I'll buy all the land and spend all this money. And the committee was like, yeah, it's
right. Diplomacy followed the money. That's crazy.
I know. Can you believe it?
But imagine how, you could see what, the UN has done to the east side of Manhattan with all the illegal parking and whatnot, all the things that locals know to avoid. Imagine that on Niihau. I guess you wouldn't have the United Nations as it is now. People would just be sitting cross-legged eating poi.
I mean, that or there would be a lot of helicopter traffic.
And that concludes The Forbidden Island. Entry 489.LV2523, certificate number 43273 in the omnibus. In the winding days of social media, when this project started, we were at Omnibus Project, at Ken Jennings, at John Roderick.
That's right. We were all those things.
Because we had received a stewardship. We wanted to keep those folkways alive.
We had. And we'd like to do a land acknowledgement now of our space on the internet. It did not belong to us.
It did not belong to Elon Musk.
And we would like to give it back.
But there's probably still some vestige of us there. You're on Instagram.
Oh, yeah, I do. I go on Instagram. I post pictures of my strange collection of East German blazer patches.
So if that's what you're into, the 3 or 4 of you who
How are you not into it?
The small number of you that would like that should go to John's Instagram right now. The rest of you can continue listening. I'm going to say an email address and some things like that. theomnibusproject@gmail.com. I will say that you can send physical items, blazer patches even, to P.O. Box.
Oh my God, do.
55744, Shoreline, Washington, 98155.
I'm looking for blazer patches specifically from Caribbean islands now.
Interesting. Is that for, you have like a summer suit you want to patch up?
What I need are anything from Eastern Europe, what we used to call Eastern Europe. Now, they would like us to call it Central Europe, but...
Yeah. Well, what's east of there?
East of there is Russia.
Yeah, which is not, doesn't feel super European anymore.
Well, I know. And then a lot of Caribbean islands. Like, I don't have any for the ABCs.
Oh, are you trying to collect a patch from every country?
A patch from every country I've visited.
I see. Got it.
Which is now somewhere on the order of 40 patches. So it's a lot of patches. I don't know what I'm going to do with them. What am I going to do with them, Ken? I was going to sew them on a Filson bag, but then I had I got some consultation from people, and they were like, you don't know how sewing machines work. You can't get a patch down there. You'd need a special sewer. But
I'm sure you could find somebody who would do that job.
I mean, for like $80 a patch.
I see.
That's a thick fabric, you know.
So if you have sent John patches and you're worried that he does not have the wherewithal to put them on a bag, you could help support Omnibus.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Go to patreon.com/Omnibus Project. We promise not to use the proceeds for anything evil. Patches on bags, in John's case. Mm-hmm. I'm probably going to buy... I just saw a coffee table book about the Washington State ferries that I might buy.
Oh, you should. That'll be nice.
These are the kinds of things that your support of the program would go to. Plus all the operating expenses. These mics aren't free.
I said not long ago that at some point in my life, I must have assumed that one day I would have a coffee table that was 30 feet long. Based on the number of coffee table books I've purchased over the years.
Well, I have shelving for them.
Well, that's not a coffee table book. That's just a book on a shelf.
Well, it is if you rotate them through your coffee table.
Oh, you take them out? They're on a cycle?
One could.
Oh, right.
You could make a little roster, a rotation, a rota. Is that the word? And you could be like, all right, Edward Hopper, it's your week.
Your week.
But guess what? Next week, Life magazine covers of the 40s, you're in.
See, mine are all like choppers from the 60s biker culture and like pearl-handled revolvers of the Old West.
That's still good.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong.
There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. You can find other futurelings online just by looking for the word futurelings, and you'll get a bunch of crappy AI results. But if you go further down, I don't know.
I hate those AI things now.
They always sound to me like a fourth grader is trying to write a paper. Like you're like, what are the imports of Malaysia? And it's like, the nation of Malaysia or Malaysian Republic has many imports. These imports are various. You know, it's I remember writing this, but why do I need to see it in my Google results?
If you didn't take the time to write it, why should I take the time to read it?
Thank you. So look for the futurelings online. They will be they'll be talking about Oprah in Hawaii right now, probably because that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, why the hell haven't we done an episode Oprah in Hawaii?
Well, she was briefly on Orcas Island.
I did know that.
She bought a big spread in the San Juans, but then she ended up never spending time there and sold it.
You got to get there by helicopter if you're Oprah.
I guess.
And they don't like helicopters up there, do they? When you're on your island
my
up
private
there,
island, my Larry Ellison island.
How many helicopters?
The helicopter is bad news. I was at the grocery store the other day up in the San Juans, and when people hear the helicopter, they're like, oh no.
What does it mean?
Life flight. It means... Because again, we don't have any health services on that island either. We're the knee-how of Washington State.
But it's not just rich people. Aren't there rich people that fly up there in a helicopter?
Not in practice, I think. I think Paul Allen used to have a place on the northeast part.
But he'd like to go up there in his yacht.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
The moneyed people probably are coming in boats.
Yeah, nice boats.
I guess there's an airport you could private plane in or seaplane into the bay. But no, Oprah apparently never hung out.
Oprah.
It would be funny because you'd see Oprah buying coffee and getting a croissant, and you'd be like, "Hey, Oprah,
what's up, Ope?"
And she would just hate that. Like everything about that interaction is delightful to me. Hey, Oprah, but she's going to hate it.
Yeah,
so she's never going to do that.
Especially everybody up there is just wearing a fleece. You can't tell who the good people are from the bad.
That's the problem. That's what we love about fleeces here.
Futurelings, from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived. We hope and pray that the catastrophe we fear may never come, but if the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may have been our final word. But if Providence allows, we wish you many goods and cheese and hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.